Hey folks, Zach Osterman here, IU Insider, Indianapolis Star. This is the Friday rundown for October, 13th, 2023. This will go live on October 12th. It is admittedly a Friday rundown built on a foundation of lies because we're shooting it on the Thursday. It's fall break in Bloomington, and I will be doing family stuff all day Friday, so we're just getting this out a day early. I think the big things to talk about for this, obviously Indiana football back on the field. Talk about that in a minute. First, Liam McNeeley, as I think everyone knows by now, is committing Sunday night. No firm time on that yet. It's going to happen out in Las Vegas, where Montverde Academy is playing in a tournament. I think they're going under the name Florida Eagles. But it's going to be Montverde's team with Asa Noel and McNeeley and Derek Queen and Curtis Gibbons and everybody. McNeeley is going to sort of publicly announce his decision then. It's obviously been long awaited. He canceled the Texas visit a little under a month ago, and so he's very much kind of been, and at least publicly perceived to be, I should say, in decision mode kind of since then. It is always worth saying with these things, I know fans sometimes think about these kids' decisions, a lot, and it's something you're constantly monitoring. I promise you these kids aren't thinking about it quite as much, and it's a lot more of something that, when they feel like it's time to sit down and discuss it with their family and their friends or their sort of their inner circle, they will. But it's not something that is kind of on their minds as often as it is sometimes for the fans following these recruitments. And so I think genuinely, McNeeley has just kind of reached a point where he felt like it was time to shift into decision-making mode. And everyone expects it to be one or the other of IU or Kansas. I don't think this is an unfair representation to say that at the moment, and again, we're shooting this Thursday afternoon, at the moment, there is certainly a strong feeling that Indiana is in a good position. Indiana has been recruiting McNeeley for a very long time. He's been a priority in this class basically as long as any player, and that even includes some of his teammates that Indiana has recruited at different times, and one for whom Indiana is perceived to be a finalist in Derek Queen. It would be a big addition for Indiana. McNeeley is a really good shooter scorer. He's particularly adept outside the three-point line. But as I talked to Eric Bossi, who's been in the recruiting game for years and years, he's 24/7 sports director of basketball recruiting. And I think I got Eric's title right there. Forgive me if I didn't, Eric. But he said that as good as McNeeley is, as skilled as he is, as an offensive player, as a passer, all those different things, he also brings the quality of having played with some really good teammates. And so, sometimes when guys take that step up from high school to college, you struggle a little bit to go from being the main man to having to fit within a wider structure. And of course, if you're playing at a prep school or in a program like Montverde Academy, you would expect that he'd be better at that. But I think that's for all the skills and the traits and the attributes that McNeeley brings, I think also that experience really helps. Because Indiana, if he does commit to Indiana, will probably have a pretty significant role for him next season. Not hard to see him starting, not hard to see him as one of Indiana's featured offensive players. But there will be other players Indiana will rely on too, particularly if Indiana lands either of Boogie Fland or Derek Queen, the other two five-star players it's still in firm competition for in 2024. But McNeeley is kind of number one. At least number one off the board, unless something changes between now and Sunday afternoon, evening. That seems to be, I think speculation is that's probably when this announcement's going to happen. It's going to happen on ESPN's family of networks somewhere. So tune in for that, I suppose. And as and when he commits to Indiana, if he does, we will have all kinds of coverage. We will, we'll stack a ton of stuff immediately, and then some greater reactions, as you can see. My border collie, Great Pyrenees puppy, climbing onto the couch behind me. Mo always likes to make a cameo on these things. Turning attention to football, and it's sort of the three keys or whatever we're calling this ahead of the weekend. Obviously, Indiana coming off the bye week and probably the toughest game Indiana will play all season, frankly. Michigan at Michigan. There are smart people that I know in football who think Michigan's the best team in the country. They have the best scoring defense in the country. They're allowing fewer than 7 points per game. They are, by almost any statistical measure, one of the best defenses in the country, one of the most efficient offenses in the country. They can hit you, they can grind you down with efficiency and physicality. They can hit you with explosive plays. They're very sort of multiple. Obviously, a playoff team a season ago that has brought a lot of that talent back and a lot of that expectation and so far production with it. And so when you look at Indiana in this game, I don't think it's sort of fair to judge Indiana on the idea that the only good result is a win. And I know people don't want moral victories, but Indiana took, I think it should be said here, it shouldn't be understated how dramatic the decision to move on from a coordinator midseason is. That's not a small thing. That is not a simple or a straightforward or a sort of a no-brainer decision for a head coach. And so you can't expect, Rod Carey said, don't expect miracles overnight. Don't expect, some sort of dramatic change of course in terms of what the playbook looks like, what, formations look like and things like that midseason. You just don't have time to run through install and to build kind of the foundation of an offense, while you're trying to get ready week after week for obviously Big Ten opponents. But I think the three things I'll be watching this weekend, frankly, are all mostly on that offensive side of the ball. First of all, just what does it look like? Are there some distinct differences that we see? Maybe Indiana's running the ball more. Maybe Indiana's utilizing wide receiver screens more. Maybe Jalen Lucas, moves back to a much more sort of pass-focused role in the offense that we like what we saw at Louisville, or against Louisville, I should say, rather than, kind of the really sort of run-heavy role it seems like Indiana's built for him the last 2 or 3 games. Just are there things that even if the offense structurally and, let's say formationally looks similar, are there some clear differences that we can point to and say, either these are preferences maybe Rod Carey has that Walt Bell didn't, or these are things that when Carey talked about his job immediately being identifying what Indiana does well and trying to sort of, trying to enhance that or build on that, and identifying what Indiana doesn't do well and sort of moving that off the table. Do we get more of a sense of, just kind of what Indiana's offense is going to look like under Rod Carey in terms of philosophy, even if maybe some of the structure and the scheme can't change dramatically right away? Number 2 would be Taven Jackson. Michigan's one of the best teams in the country against the pass, certainly one of the best teams in the Big Ten. I think only 2 passing touchdowns allowed all season, 7 interceptions, top 3 in the Big Ten in opponent passer rating. All of what you'd expect from a defense that's big, that's physical, that's deep, that's athletic and fast. Taven Jackson doesn't have to go out and throw for 400 yards, but Tom Allen kind of reinforced this week Jackson is still Indiana's starting quarterback. There was maybe some sort of vagueness around that coming out of the Maryland game. Jackson remains QB1, again, especially set against the backdrop of what is a sort of a new way forward offensively. Just how does Taven Jackson look? Can you get more of the Taven Jackson of the Louisville game that looked more comfortable, that looked more in rhythm, that was able to make some pretty high-level throws against an FBS defense and able to move Indiana offensively, sort of with at a consistent level and be able to finish drives and put points on the board. And against a team like Michigan, that's not always going to be touchdowns, but at least you're building sort of if you're going to build a foundation and sort of say, these are the things that we need to ground our offense in between now and the end of the season. A quarterback has to be the first player that seems like he's got his arms around all of that, and he's got to be the player that probably has his arms furthest around it to torture that metaphor through to its conclusion. So Taven Jackson, I'll be watching. And then the third thing I would say is efficiency from Indiana. If Indiana can get, again, Indiana has struggled at times on third downs. They're 8th in the conference in third down conversion rate, 40%, flat right at 40%. It's not horrible, but it's not great, and it's obviously not been great. It's been particularly poor in some of the FBS games Indiana's been playing. That's kind of inflated by a big number they put up against Indiana State. Can the Hoosiers, when they need to be more efficient, especially if you can get into some third and short, obviously some red zone situations, certainly some goal line situations, can you get, if you can get into those sorts of moments against a good Michigan defense, what does it look like? Do we see Indiana suddenly maybe executing a little bit better, trying some different things, whether it's formationally or just literally what Indiana tries to do to convert a 3rd and 1 or a 3rd and 2 or a 4th and 1? In terms of obviously the Louisville game is probably the example that's most relevant in people's minds in terms of the getting down to the goal line in the fourth quarter of that game and not being able to push through. Just does Indiana look different if it can get into some of those moments? Whether we're talking about short yardage conversions, whether we're talking about sort of red zone opportunities and red zone efficiency, and obviously scoring opportunities kind of go hand in glove with all that. Again, it's not a game where if Indiana doesn't win, then no progress was made. That's just, Michigan at Michigan is going to be a tall task for basically everybody this year, and that's just the nature of it. But if you can go up there, if you're Indiana, and maybe prove some things to yourself offensively, maybe score some points again against a defense that does not allow many points, like at all. In any year, allowing fewer than 7 points per game through the first half of your season is a remarkable achievement. In modern college football, with the way that offenses are and rules are today, it's almost unheard of. And it's also going to be interesting because, frankly, there's one other really, really good defense on the immediate horizon in Indiana's schedule, and that's Penn State, which is in pretty much the same neighborhood right now as Michigan in a lot of these defensive categories that we're talking about. Michigan has the best scoring defense in the country. Penn State's number 2. So that kind of gives you a sense of just where, what Indiana's going to have to be ready for between now and the end of the season. The puppy's getting restless, so I'm going to shut it down there. But again, it's going to be a big weekend for Indiana athletics, certainly. It was a big week. Soccer's got a big game against Ohio State. Volleyball with a ranked win over Purdue. I think the more you look at that Indiana volleyball team, the more you feel like you're looking at an NCAA tournament team for the first time in a long time for that program. And both IU football and basketball are going to have some pretty fascinating weekends in different ways. We'll leave it there. For the Indianapolis Star, I'm Zach Osterman. Thank you so much for watching the Friday Rundown here on Thursday. We will be back after the Michigan game with resuming our regularly scheduled programming, the Sunday night podcast. Obviously, as and when Indiana starts to add to its recruiting class in 2024, we'll hit you with all kinds of content from that. And we're only 8 days away now from Hoosier Hysteria, and I know everyone is obviously anticipating that as well. So plenty to come. Thank you for watching. We'll talk to you soon.